Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Human Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The morning Brooke told me my room was no longer mine, the whole house smelled like onions and rosemary. I was in the kitchen, leaning over the old cast iron pot I had used every Thursday for decades. Beef was searing the bottom of the pan, beginning to catch oil popping against my wrist. The radio on the counter murmured some country song about getting older. Outside the window, mist hung over the fir trees at the edge of the yard. I heard her before I saw her. The sharp, quick steps on the stairs, the rustle of her silk pajama pants, the faint trail of coconut shampoo. "Helen," she said, not even a greeting. "We need to talk." I turned the heat down and wiped my hands on my apron. "Morning, Brooke. Coffee's fresh if you want some." She ignored the coffee. She set her laptop on the island, flipped it open as if we were about to go over a presentation, then looked up at me calm and direct. "So, my parents are going to take your room." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. The pot hissed. A car passed by, out on Maple Ridge Road tires, whispering on wet asphalt. "My room," I repeated. "You mean the guest room." Her mouth twitched something between a smile and impatience. "No. The master. They are not going to squeeze into that little shoebox upstairs. They are in their 60s, Helen. They need a proper bed, a bathroom that is not down the hall." I felt the edge of the counter under my fingertips, the laminate smooth and cold. "The master is where Jack and I slept," I said. "It is the only room on this floor. The bathroom is attached. It is where he spent his last night." Brooke clicked something on her screen, not looking at me. "Exactly. It is closer to the kitchen, less stairs for them." "It makes sense. You can move into the storage room. It is not that bad. A fresh coat of paint, a twin bed, and you are good." The word lodged in my chest. "The storage room," I said slowly. "The one off the laundry, the one without windows." She sighed like I was missing something obvious. "You hardly sleep, you always say that. You do not need all that space just to lie awake staring at the ceiling." She finally lifted her gaze. "You are alone, Helen. Ethan is at work all day and Jack is gone. My parents still have each other. They deserve to be comfortable." Alone, gone, comfortable. The words lined up like bullets. Steam from the pot rose into my face. The smell was turning from brown to burnt. I reached for the spoon, stirring just to have something to do with my hands. "This is my house," I said quietly. "Jack and I paid for every nail, every shingle." Brooke gave a short laugh that did not reach her eyes. "No one is taking your house. We are just being practical about rooms. Space has to match needs." "My parents lost their home. You have an entire floor for one person." Her tone softened a fraction. "And you always say you do not like being alone downstairs at night. The storage room is closer to the stairs. It might even feel safer." There was a way she did this, wrapped her demands in the kind of logic that made you feel small for even questioning it. "When did you plan all this?" I asked. "I told them Sunday," she said. 10 in the morning. I already promised them the master. Their knees are bad. Stairs are rough. So please do not make it awkward when they get here." "Ethan does not know," I said. She closed the laptop with a soft click. "Ethan hates conflict. If you start in with guilt and tears, it will only stress him out. You do not want that for him, do you?" I was 65 years old, but in that moment I felt like a girl again, cornered in a hallway with no good answer. "No," I said. "Good." She picked up her laptop. At the doorway, she turned back, her voice lighter. "And please do not start with the 'this is my room, my memories' routine. Jack has been gone a long time. You cannot sleep next to a ghost forever." The radio hummed, the pot roast smoked. I watched Brooke walk out, bare feet soundless on the wood floor Jack had installed by hand. When the silence settled, my knees went weak. I turned off the stove, slid the pot to a cold burner, and got out of the kitchen before the smell of burnt meat made me sick. In the bedroom, the light was soft, pale Oregon sun, filtering through curtains Jack had hung with a leveler and a care that had annoyed me at the time. His photograph sat on the nightstand, the cheap silver frame he had picked up at a thrift store. In the picture, he was standing in the front yard, next to the hydrangeas, hands on his hips, hair too long, grin too wide. Behind him, the house looked almost finished shingles, new paint still bright. "I'm sorry," I whispered. My voice sounded strange in the room. I let them talk about this room like it is just square footage. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my palm to the old quilt. The mattress dipped under my weight the way it always had, familiar and unforgiving. It had not always been like this. I had not always been someone who stood in her own house feeling like a guest waiting to be told where she was allowed to sleep. There had been a time when every board in this place smelled like fresh lumber and new beginnings. I met Jack Carter in a grocery store in Portland when I was 23. He was in line ahead of me holding a carton of eggs and a bag of nails, which I took as a bad combination. "Those are going to break," I said. He turned, looked down at the eggs, then at me. "That is the plan," he said. "I am making breakfast in a house with no furniture. If that is not romance, I do not know what is." He made me laugh. That was how it started. 6 months later, we were standing in front of a half-built house in Maple Ridge, Oregon, wine tugging at my hair, the smell of sawdust thick in the air. Jack had saved every spare dollar from his job at the wood shop. I had taken extra hours at the diner, carrying plates until my feet throbbed. "It will not look like much for a while," he said, spreading his arms, "but it will be ours." He planted 4 hydrangea bushes along the front porch, that same week his jeans stained with dirt, his fingernails rimmed with black. "Why these?" I had asked. He wiped sweat from his forehead with his wrist. "They change color depending on the soil. I like things that do not stay the same." Back then, change sounded like adventure, not like loss. Ethan was born 2 years later. I remember bringing him home the way his newborn cry echoed in rooms that still smelled faintly of fresh paint. We were young and tired and broke, but there was always food on the table and something small to look forward to, even if it was just coffee on the porch, watching the hydrangeas. On Thursdays, when the paycheck cleared and the bills were paid, I made pot roast. I browned the meat in that same pot, added onions and potatoes and carrots, let it simmer all afternoon while Ethan did his homework at the kitchen table, and Jack tinkered with some piece of furniture in the shed. Those nights we ate slow, talked about nothing and everything, the 3 of us lit by the yellow pendant lamp Jack had wired himself. Years later, when Ethan left for college, the house got quieter. Thursday pot roast remained. Jack said it made the place feel full again. Even if it was just the 2 of us, we set 3 plates, a silly habit we never broke. Then came the diagnosis. Jack grew pale and thin in a way that no amount of pot roast could fix. The hospital lights made him look translucent, like he was already halfway gone. When the doctor said stage 4 and aggressive, the words bounced off the walls of my skull and rolled around without ever really landing. He came home to this house to die because that was what he wanted. On his last night, the hydrangeas were in bloom outside the bedroom window. It was June, and the air smelled like wet earth and the faint sweetness of flowers. He held my hand, his skin loose and too warm. "Take care of our boy," he whispered. His lips were dry. "Take care of yourself, too. Promise me." I nodded, but the promise broke before the sun came up. After the funeral, Ethan drove back and forth from Portland every weekend. He sat at the kitchen table in the chair where his father used to sit. We drank coffee that went cold in our hands. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we did not. When he was not there, the house was a shell. The ticking clock in the hallway sounded like footsteps that never arrived. A year after Jack died, Ethan came over one Sunday with a light in his eyes I had not seen since before the hospital. I met someone, he said, standing in my kitchen with his hair still damp from the rain. Her name was Brooke. She worked in marketing at his company. She liked old movies and strong coffee. She had a quick laugh. He told me all of this in one breath. The first time she came to the house, she brought a glass vase with a single pale blue hydrangea in it. "I drove past a nursery and saw these," she said. "Ethan told me your husband planted them. I thought you might like another one." She walked through my kitchen as if she had been there before, but not in a way that felt intrusive. She asked about Jack, about how long we had lived in Maple Ridge. There were tears in her eyes when I told her about his last night. "You were so lucky," she said softly. "Most people never get that kind of love." I believe she understood something about us, about him. The wedding was small. A few friends, a rented barn on the edge of town, string lights and cheap wine. Brooke wore simple white hair pinned up with tiny pearls. Ethan cried through the vows. I cried through most of the reception. When they came back from a short trip to the coast, Ethan pulled me aside in the living room. "Mom," he said, "we have been talking. The rent in Portland is insane. This house is huge. We were thinking we could move in for a while, help out, keep you company. Everyone wins." He looked hopeful, a little boy again, waiting for me to say yes to one more ride, one more story. "You are newlyweds," I said. "You need your own space." "Our own space can be upstairs," he said. "We can take the guest room. You will not even know we are here half the time. Besides, I hate the thought of you alone in this big place every night." The word alone pressed on all the hollow spots inside me. The thought of footsteps on the stairs, of voices in the kitchen, of someone besides me, closing cabinets and turning off lights felt like air after being underwater too long. I said yes. When they moved in, I gave Ethan the ring of keys that had hung beside the front door for 30 years. "This is still your house," he said, folding my fingers around the metal. "We are just borrowing a little corner." At first, it did feel like that. Brooke helped me cook. She stood beside me at the stove, asking about measurements and spices, laughing when I said I did not really know, I just went by smell. We watched old movies on the couch, the three of us under one worn blanket, the TV flickering in the dark. She brought scented candles and new throw pillows that actually looked good. Ethan seemed lighter, less haunted. The sound of their footsteps on the stairs at night made the house feel alive again. One afternoon, not long after they moved in, I walked past the open door of the master bedroom. Brooke was standing inside tape measures stretched between her hands. She was looking around with a thoughtful expression, eyes moving from the bed to the dresser to the window that faced the yard. She caught my eye in the mirror and smiled. "Just thinking out loud," she said. "This room has so much potential." I remember that now as I sit on the same bed. She was measuring my hand on Jack's picture, and Brooke's words from the kitchen still hanging in the air. So much potential. For what I had not asked. For a long time after Brooke left the kitchen, I did not move. The pot had gone from brown to bitter. I poured water over the heat and stood in the steam until my eyes stung. In the bedroom, Jack smiled from the cheap frame a man caught in permanent sunlight. I touched the glass, then set the picture down and went looking for air. The house gave me a different kind of memory than the gentle ones. It brought back the first crack the first time I felt my name slide off the title of my own life. It was a Thursday a few weeks after Ethan and Brooke had moved in. I came home from the farmer's market with paper bags biting into my forearms. The kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner and a candle that said sea salt printed in fancy script. Brooke stood at the island with a garbage bag folded open and her phone playing a podcast about decluttering. "Look at you," she said. "Farm fresh." I smiled because it was a normal thing to say. I set the bags on the counter, reached into the top one for carrots. That was when I saw the tin. My tin. The lid was off the recipe cards, spilled and bent, stained with oil and old sauce, my husband's neat handwriting, smudged by time and kitchen steam. The whole stack sat in the bag like something that had already been decided. "What are you doing?" I asked. It came out too soft. Brooke did not look up from the drawer she was cleaning. She held a chipped mug to the light, then tipped it into the trash. "Getting rid of the ancient stuff, mold traps and grease catchers. We can redo this whole space with light wood and clear jars. Pinterest has so many ideas." I reached for the cards. My fingers shook and slipped against the slick edges. Jack wrote these. Brooke finally turned. She saw my hands and the mess of cards and the way I was half crouched by the trash like an animal. She changed her voice lighter, joking. "Helen, come on. They are just recipes. Everything is online. Let us move forward a little. Jack would not want you hoarding. He would want a clean slate." She used his name with a confidence that felt practiced. I took the tin, gathered what I could, wiped the worst of the grease with a dish towel, then carried the pieces to the sink. She kept cleaning. She hummed while she slid my old casserole dish into the bag and tied the plastic in a neat knot. I ran water over ink that should never have seen a faucet. That night, I did not make pot roast. I made grilled chicken and a salad with too much lemon. Ethan ate without looking up from his phone. "It is fine," he said. It was the kind of sentence that cannot be answered without making yourself sound silly. After he and Brooke went upstairs, I laid the recipe cards out on a towel and turned on the little fan I used in summer. The cards rippled as they dried. Jack's handwriting climbed and dipped across the titles. Thursday pot roast, 3-bean chili. Sunday morning. Sweet rolls. I collected them when they were no longer wet. Counted the missing ones without meaning to, then tucked the tin into the bottom drawer of my bedroom dresser where no one but me ever looked. The next things were small. That was how they worked. Small enough to step over and pretend you had not tripped. One afternoon, I was watching a black and white movie in the living room. The light in the room at that hour made dust look like snow. Brooke walked through with a glass of wine and paused at the doorway. "These daytime soaps," she said. "If friends stop by, it gives the place a sad vibe. Maybe watch in your room. It is cozier." She did not wait for my answer. She set her glass on a coaster and opened her laptop, the type of open that fills a room even when it makes no sound. I took the remote and the Afghan and climbed the stairs like someone leaving a waiting room when their name is never called. On a Saturday, Denise came by with donuts in a greasy paper bag and stories that could make a funeral director laugh. We sat on the front steps, knees touching sugar on our fingers, the hydrangeas nodding their heavy heads in a breeze that smelled like rain. Before she arrived, I had dabbed on the perfume Jack bought me every birthday, the one that smelled like cedar and some flower neither of us could ever name. Brooke came out holding a laundry basket. "Hey," she said, bright as a store greeter. "Ethan is resting. He worked late all week. Could you guys keep it down? Also, the scent is kind of strong. He gets headaches from heavy fragrances." Denise squeezed my hand once hard, then stood and brushed crumbs from her jeans. "I will call you," she said. Her voice was normal. Her eyes were not. When she drove away, the empty space on the steps next to me felt like a missing tooth. Then there was the garage. The day it hailed the sky went the color of a bruise. I turned into the driveway and hit the remote and watched the door climb. Inside was a wall of boxes, a chrome bike, Brooke's labeled bins, a small wine rack that had never lived here until it did. Brooke ran out with an umbrella and a worried face for me and my old sedan. "I thought you would not mind the driveway," she said over the hail. "My car is leased. Hail is a nightmare on the contract." She smiled like we were both in on the same joke. I nodded like we were. At dinner one Sunday, I tried to speak to Ethan while a game played on the television. The commentator sounded like urgent birds. "Ethan," I said, "sometimes I do not know where I'm supposed to be anymore. I'm not sure what parts of the house I can use without it being a problem." He kept his eyes on the screen for a long time. When he spoke, he chose careful words. "Mom Brooke is just making things work. She's used to modern spaces, minimal. She is trying to help. You take things so personal." "It is my house," I said. It came out a whisper. I was not trying to make it small, but that is how it sounded. He patted my hand without looking. "You know what I mean. You are still living in the past. That is not good for you." The next morning, Brooke stood in the yard with a landscaping app open on her phone. She spread her fingers to zoom and talked about river rocks and succulents and clean lines. She glanced at the hydrangeas and laughed lightly. "These are cute, very vintage. We can rethink the front. Gravel is so low maintenance." I listened from the porch with my coffee warm against my palms. The hydrangeas shifted in the light, pale blue and white, and blushed the colors that Jack liked for reasons he never explained. I pictured him with his shovel dirt on his jeans, his hair and his eyes that grin that made plans sound like promises. I finished my coffee and went inside and closed the door softly like something that can still be undone. Days stacked on days until the house learned to make itself small around Brooke. The living room became a showroom where people sat with their legs crossed and spoke in soft voices. The kitchen was a project. My perfume stayed in the bathroom cabinet with the nail scissors and the old bottle of aspirin. The master became a room I entered with my shoulders already tight. At night, noise drifted up from the kitchen. Ethan's laugh, quick and surprised. Brooke's lower voice threading through it. The ice maker knocking, water running in the sink. Cabinet doors closing with the soft click of new felt pads she had stuck on to protect the paint. I would lie in the dip in the mattress and watch the faint reflection of the hallway light on the ceiling and try to decide whether I was the one who had moved or whether the house had. On a Sunday evening, I came down to get a glass of water and found Brooke at the island with her laptop open to a spreadsheet. She looked up with a smile that was almost kind. "Your pot roast is amazing," she said, "but Ethan and I are trying to eat lighter. More salads, less heavy sauces. Could we make that a thing? Modernize a bit." I nodded because I had already stopped making it. I opened a cabinet and reached for a glass and knocked into the ring of keys hanging on a hook. They chimed a bright sound for something that had never made noise before. I caught the ring before it fell. My hand closed around the cool metal, the weight of house and gate and garage and rooms, where I did not feel welcome anymore. I slid the keys back onto the hook and set the glass in the sink. I did not turn on the light. I stood in the dark and listened to the hum of the refrigerator and the slow drumming of the clock in the hall. Later in the master, I pulled the bottom drawer and lifted the tin. I opened it and fanned the cards on the bedspread. The room smelled like old fabric and the ghost of rosemary. On the top card, Jack's notes ran in a steady line. "Season, then let it sit. Be patient." I touched the ink and felt the slight ridge where the pen had pressed too hard. When I put the tin away, I walked to the back door. The yard was blue with evening. The hydrangeas were dark shapes, quiet and full. I turned the little lock and heard the bolt slide into place. The sound was small. It carried through the empty kitchen and into the rest of the house. Morning came thin and gray, the kind that makes the firs look like paper cutouts against the sky. I set the kettle on the stove and waited for the click of the burner. The house held itself quiet as if it wanted to hear what I would do next. Brooke's phone sat on the counter by the fruit bowl, the screen lit with a soft buzz. I did not touch it. The preview line was enough. "Did you tell the old woman to give us the room? If she refuses, remind her Ethan will leave. She will do anything not to be alone." The kettle began to murmur. I turned the burner off and listened to the ring die away. The phone went dark. I stood there with my hands flat on the counter and watched my breath fog the cold window over the sink. Brooke came in wearing a sweatshirt and leggings, hair pulled into a careless knot. She grabbed the phone without looking at me, scrolled, and walked out toward the stairs. Her voice lifted the careful voice she used for family. "Hey, Mom," she said. "Yes, Sunday, 10. I stepped to the doorway and stayed just out of sight in the shadow of the hall. Her words floated back in pieces. "The master, obviously. No, not that tiny room. She is easy if you guilt her a little. Say Ethan will be stressed. She hates that." Silence, then a lower tone, a laugh. "Of course we will handle it. Once she is miserable enough, we can talk Ethan into assisted living. Then we sell and split. The market is insane. It is a no-brainer." The words moved through the house like cold water. Assisted living, sell and split. I put my hand against the wall because the floor felt like it had shifted under me. Brooke climbed the stairs, still talking. I stayed at the bottom with my hand on the banister and listened to the last syllables slide into the ceiling. In the yard, the air tasted like wet iron. I stepped off the porch boards Jack had sanded smooth and crossed the narrow strip of grass to the hydrangeas. 3 of the 4 bushes were brown at the edges, the leaves turned a flat, wrong color. When I reached for a branch, it crackled in my hand. The soil smelled like laundry day. A plastic bottle lay on its side in the mulch, the label peeled a crescent of clear liquid still trapped under the rim. Bleach has a smell that lives in your nose. It clung to my fingers even after I let the branch go. I crouched and followed the thin, woody stems down to where they came out of the dirt. At the base of one dead bush, a new green pushed up the size of a thumbnail slick with dew. It looked stubborn, the kind of green that keeps going whether anyone wants it to or not. I straightened and stood there looking at the crooked line of the porch rail and the front door with its peeling paint. A sparrow landed on the mailbox and stabbed at something I could not see. The house stood where it always had, but I felt as if I had walked out of my life and found a version where someone had moved the furniture by an inch in every room. Just enough to stub your toe on everything you thought you knew. Inside, the clock in the hall ticked. I went to the bedroom and pulled the bottom drawer. The tin was where I had left it. I brought it to the bed and set it in the center of the quilt. When I opened the lid, the first card on top was Thursday pot roast. The ink had bled a little from the night I tried to undo what had been done. Next to the title in Jack's hand was a crooked line in 3 tight words, "Season then wait." The house settled. Somewhere upstairs a pipe clicked. I put the card back and closed the lid. In the kitchen, the phone on the wall still worked, the beige plastic smooth where fingers had touched it for years. I took the handset off the cradle and dialed numbers I knew from habit. "Kaplan and Shore," a young voice said. "How can I help you?" "Samuel, please," I said. "Tell him it is Helen Carter." A pause, papers moving. A line clicked. "Helen," Sam said. "You all right?" "I need to see you," I said. My voice sounded steady to my own ears, which felt like a small miracle. "Today, if you can. I need to know whose name is on my house." He exhaled in a way that was not quite a laugh. "Yours," he said, "but come in, we will pull the file." The drive into Portland took an hour in light traffic. The highway slid past fields and the flat glint of water. In Sam's office, the windows looked over a parking lot and a slice of gray river. His hair had gone more white since I had seen him last. He pulled the accordion folder from a cabinet and laid it on the desk like a book that had been read too many times. "Deed," he said, tapping the page. "Paid in full 7 years ago. Title in your name only. No liens. No second mortgage." He turned one more page and looked up over his reading glasses. "What happened?" I told him, "Not all of it. Enough." When I said assisted living, his mouth tightened. When I said sell and split, he looked out the window and then back at me. "Here's what we can do," he said. He kept his voice even. "You have options because this is yours. If you want to set terms, you set them. If they want to use a room, they pay a market rate. If they do not like that, they find another solution." "Put it on paper," I said. He nodded. "We will draft a short-term residential license for the master suite. Monthly rent, security deposit, clear rules on access and termination. We will print a clean copy of your deed. I can be present when you present the documents if you want the wait." I want the weight, I said. We chose numbers that made sense in a town like ours, where people from far away had started buying houses like they were souvenirs. He slid the draft into a folder and wrote the day and time on a sticky note for his own memory. He handed me my copy of the deed in a plastic sleeve. The paper felt heavier than its size. My name looked both familiar and strange, printed there in black. On the way home, drizzle started and then stopped, the kind of half rain that Oregon does when it cannot decide. At a red light, I found myself looking at my hands on the wheel. The veins stood up in blue lines. The skin at my knuckles had begun to thin. Jack had once held these hands and called them small. He had kissed the ridge of bone that now looked sharp. I curled my fingers until the skin smoothed and then let them go. Back at the house, the living room smelled faintly of a candle Brooke had blown out that morning. I put the deed in the drawer with the placemats and napkin rings because that was a drawer no one else ever used. The light in the kitchen fell in a bright rectangle on the floor. The keys hung where they always did. I took the ring down and held it a minute and then set it back. I went upstairs. Brooke's voice drifted from the closed bedroom low and urgent, the same tone she used when she wanted something to happen without looking like she was doing anything. I set a small black recorder on the corner of the hall table and pressed the red button. The light winked on. I leaned my shoulder against the wall and watched the light pulse. Her words slid under the door in a ribbon. "Dad," she said, "that is not what I meant. I meant once she's moved upstairs, she will see it is better for her. Do not make it bigger than it is. Just be here Sunday at 10. She laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Stop, I have it under control." Downstairs, I washed the breakfast dishes that were not mine. I dried them and put them in the cabinets in the places Brooke liked them to go. I wiped the counter and the sink until they shone. I ran a cloth over the handle of the back door, and the knob picked up my fingerprints like memory. Outside, the hydrangeas hunched in the damp. The sick leaves held their shape as if the plant did not want to admit what had been done to it. Late afternoon, Ethan came home tired. He dropped his backpack by the door and kissed my cheek and asked about my day. His eyes were kind and far away, as if they were the only part of him that had not learned how to be somewhere else when the room got complicated. I touched his hair like I had when he was a boy, and he ducked away with a laugh that had nothing to do with joy. That night, I boiled potatoes and mashed them with milk and salt and a little butter the way Jack liked. I ate standing at the counter. The house creaked as it cooled. Upstairs, a drawer shut and another opened. The recorder sat in my palm. It felt like nothing. It felt like something I could hold up to the light when I needed to remember what was true. I carried a stack of papers to the dining table and laid them out one by one. Deed. License agreement. A list of the contents of the master's suite that had not changed in 20 years except for small repairs. I put a pen at the top of the page and another at the bottom, a habit from the days when Jack brought home contracts that needed 2 signatures. I wiped the picture frame on the buffet where Jack stood with the hydrangeas behind him. The glass came clean. The cheap silver showed a scratch I had never noticed. I set it back and stepped away and looked at him from a little distance. He looked the same as he always had looked, which is to say, he looked young and sure and alive. In the hall, the keys clicked against each other when I moved them to make a little space for my hand on the hook. I let them hang. Their weight tugged the hook down just a fraction. The sound went into the quiet rooms and stayed there, a small bright note that did not fade. Sunday came bright and cool. I ironed the navy dress Jack had bought me for an anniversary and set a cup of coffee on the dining table. The house had the quiet of early church. The keys by the door tapped once against each other when I brushed past. At 9:30 the bell rang. Sam stood on the porch with a leather case and a coat folded over his arm. He shook my hand and looked me in the eye for a slow second that said he understood what a moment was. "Morning, Helen," he said. "In here," I said. We sat at the table. He slid the deed into the center and set the other papers in a neat stack beside it. The paper looked simple, black ink on white, my name in the right places. Brooke came halfway down the stairs, hair smooth, makeup careful. She stopped when she saw Sam. Her smile was the kind you use when you are not sure yet. "Who is this?" she asked. "Samuel Kaplan," he said, "counsel to Mrs. Carter." "Why would she need a lawyer?" Brooke said. The voice was light, the neck muscles were not. "For clarity," Sam said. Ethan came in from the kitchen with a mug and a confused look. He took in the table, the papers, the lawyer, the quiet. "Mom," he said, "what is going on?" The bell rang again at 10. Ethan opened the door. Ray and Donna rolled in with suitcases and humid air. They wore road clothes and the kind of smiles people use when they have already decided something belongs to them. Brookie Donna said, "You undersold this place. It is beautiful." Ray set a suitcase down and clapped his hands once like someone at an auction. "So where are we putting our stuff?" Brooke moved toward the stairs. "Up, the master. Wait until you see the shower." "Stop a second," I said. Everyone turned toward me. My voice sounded like water on cold iron. It surprised me to hear it. "There is a misunderstanding," I said. "No one moves into that room without talking to me." Sam slid the deed an inch closer to the edge of the table. He placed a finger on the title line. "Owner," he read. "Helen Louise Carter, Soul." Ray laughed once. It sounded like a cough. "We are family," he said. "We do not need to waive papers. We are helping each other." I looked at Donna. Her eyes flicked to Brooke and back to me. She did not step forward. She did not step back. "If you want to use the master suite, I said there are terms." Sam picked up the top sheet. "Short-term residential license," he said. "Master suite with attached bath and balcony. Monthly rent at $3,800. Security deposit at $7,600. Paid on signing. Access limited to the licensed room and kitchen during posted hours. Termination at owner's discretion." Ray's mouth fell open. "We just lost our home," he said. "We do not have that kind of money." "That is why your daughter promised you mine," I said, "with me in the storage closet." Brooke's cheeks went a high color. "This is insane," she said. "Ethan, please say something. She's doing this to make a point." Ethan looked from me to Sam to the paper and back. The room felt tight around his eyes. Donna touched the handle of her suitcase. "Brooke," she said, "you said Helen needed company. You said she wanted us here." Brooke's laugh came quick and brittle. "Do not be naive, Mom," she said. "This is power play. She's making me look bad." I reached into my sweater pocket and set the small black recorder on the table. I pressed play. The room filled with Brooke's voice. It sounded like her and not like her. "She is easy if you guilt her," it said. "Say Ethan will be stressed. She hates that." A beat of static, then the afternoons. "Once she's miserable enough, we can talk Ethan into assisted living. Then we sell and split. The market is insane. It is a no-brainer." No one moved. Outside, a car went by slow enough that we heard gravel spit under tires. The hydrangeas brushed the porch rail with a soft rasp that found its way through old wood and into the room. Ethan set his mug down without looking and missed the coaster. Coffee ran in a thin brown line toward the edge. He did not wipe it. He looked at Brooke as if he were trying to put her new shape over her old one to see if they would line up. "Did you say that?" he asked. She opened her mouth and closed it. "You are taking it out of context," she said. "You know how I talk when I am stressed. I was venting. I would never actually do that." "Your mother recorded me in our own house. What kind of person does that?" "A person you called old woman," I said. "A person you wanted out of the way." Ray lifted his suitcase. "Donna," he said softly, "let us go." Donna nodded. She did not look at Brooke when she passed her. The wheels thumped over the threshold. The front door closed. The sound moved through the house and settled in the kitchen. Brooke stared at the closed door, then at me. Her voice came low and sharp. "You think you won something," she said. "You just broke your son's marriage." I felt tired in a way I had not felt when I woke up. "I did not break it," I said. I opened a window. She looked at Ethan. "Say something," she said. "Say something right now." He ran a hand over his face and left it there. When he dropped it, his eyes were wet and angry. "I do not know what to say," he said. "I do not understand any of this." Brooke breathed out through her nose and went upstairs. Her steps were measured. The bedroom door closed with a hard, exact sound. Sam gathered his papers and stood. "Call me if you need me," he said. I walked him to the porch. The air had warmed. A neighbor pushed a stroller past and nodded. When I turned back, Ethan was still at the table with his hands on the wood, like he needed to feel something solid. I sat across from him. We did not speak. The keys on the wall shone in their circle. The days after felt like the house had been emptied and then filled again with a different arrangement. Brooke moved in the halls like a ghost who knew the floor plan. She did not look at me. She did not look at Ethan unless she had to. At night, I heard her crying once a thin sound, then nothing. On a Monday evening, Ethan knocked on my door. He sat on the edge of the bed and folded his hands like he used to when he was about to admit a broken thing. "I cannot get her words out of my head," he said. "I keep hearing them in different rooms." I said nothing. I waited. "I do not know how I did not see it," he said. "I do not know how I let us get here." "You were working," I said. "You were trying to make a life." He nodded. He looked small in a way that had nothing to do with size. He put his head on my shoulder and I held him like I had held him after Little League losses, and the day a girl in 8th grade told him he was too quiet to be liked. The next day, he asked us both to sit in the living room. Afternoon light made lines on the rug. The house had the silence that means it is paying attention. Brooke came down in a sweater with the sleeves pulled over her hands. She sat on the edge of a chair and crossed her ankles. Ethan did not sit. He stood near the window with one hand on the sill. He looked from her to me and back to her. "I cannot live like this," he said. "I cannot pretend I did not hear what I heard. I cannot pretend you did not plan to move my mother out of her own room and then into a place where she did not choose to go." Brooke opened her mouth and closed it. Her chin shook. "I am sorry," she said. "I was scared. My parents lost everything. I thought I could fix it. I did not think it through. I did not mean it. Not like that." He shook his head. "Maybe you did not. Maybe you did. I do not know. I only know how it felt when I heard you say it." She watched him as if she could stop him from speaking if she did not blink. So what she said. "You choose her." "I choose a line," he said. "I choose to be able to look at myself." She leaned back and laughed once. "So that is it. Mommy wins." He took a breath that trembled. "No. Respect wins." She rubbed her eyes with the heel of her hand. When she said, "This weekend," he said, "I will help with the boxes." Her mouth trembled. For a second I thought she might say thank you. She did not. She stood and walked up the stairs with a careful balance like someone carrying a full glass that must not spill. I stayed where I was. The light on the rug shifted. In the quiet, the keys by the door touched and made a thin, bright sound. Outside, the hydrangeas moved in a small wind. The moving truck was smaller than I expected. It backed into the driveway and beeped twice. The driver left it idling while he signed the clipboard with Brooke. The morning had a thin sun and a breeze that lifted the porch flag and let it fall again. I kept to the kitchen. The coffee was hot enough to fog the window over the sink. Boxes came down the stairs in a slow rhythm. Tape rippled. Footsteps adjusted to wait. Brooke passed the doorway with a carton marked closet in black marker and then returned for shoes. Ethan followed with a stack of folded sweaters and a lamp wrapped in a towel. At the threshold, she paused. She held the box like a shield and looked smaller without the rest of the house around her. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the roses, for the recipes, for all the ways I made you feel small." Her hands tightened on the cardboard. I saw the faint ridge on her finger where a ring had been. "I hope you learn something that lasts," I said. My voice was not unkind. It was not warm either. It felt like room temperature water. She nodded. She lifted the box and went out to the truck. Ethan helped her stack the last of it. They spoke with their heads close together and the kind of voices people use when they are keeping something from falling apart. She cried once quick and put her hand over her mouth. He did not touch her face. He held the box until she took it. When the truck pulled away, the house made a sound I had heard before only after storms. The floorboards seemed to take a breath. Ethan closed the door. He leaned his back against it and slid his palms over his eyes. When he dropped his hands, there was salt on his cheeks. I brought him a glass of water. He did not drink it. He set it on the sideboard and looked at me like a boy who had been out in the cold too long. "She is gone," he said. I nodded. The keys by the door tapped once and were quiet. That week I opened windows. The first warm day of spring followed the cold like a gentle horse behind a rough one. I changed the sheets and carried the old set to the washer, watched the drum turn, listened to water fill and stop. I pulled the throw pillows into a pile and chose the two that had always belonged on the couch. I took the picture of Jack off the buffet and wiped the dust from the frame. The cheap silver caught the light and made a tiny star on the wall. The tin came out of the dresser drawer and went onto the counter by the stove where it had sat for most of my life. I ran my fingers over the dent on the lid and then opened it and breathed in paper and oil and parsley that was not really there. Denise came by with a paper bag of donuts and sat on the steps like there had been no interruption. She put her elbow on my knee and told a story about a rooster that had adopted the neighbor's cat. I laughed and surprised myself with the sound. The hydrangeas along the porch showed new growth at the base. Brown spent stems held themselves upright. Green pushed up in clean points. We cooked at the same time for a while. Ethan handled dinner 3 nights in a row, burning one pan and then scrubbing it until he could see himself in the bottom. He started to talk about his day in specifics again. Names of people I had never met, the way the light looked in the office at 5, the sound the server made when it was about to fail. The words came out simple. They kept the house busy in a way I had missed. On a Saturday, he stepped into the kitchen with someone behind him. She had a braid over one shoulder and a bunch of sunflowers wrapped in brown paper. "Mom," he said a little breathless, "this is Lauren." She held out the flowers. "For your table," she said. "Ethan told me you like color in the mornings." Her eyes were the kind that looked straight at you and not at your hands or your hair or what you were wearing. She sat at the table and helped slice peaches for a pie. Her hands were quick and clean. She asked where the bowls lived, and when I told her, she put them back in the same place without making a new decision. In the afternoon, when the light was kind, she walked the yard with me. She bent and touched a hydrangea leaf with 2 fingers, as if greeting the plant. "My grandmother had these," she said. "She swore they listen when you talk to them." "Do you talk to yours?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said. "Mostly I listen." A week later, on a day with rain that could not decide, between drizzle and nothing, Ethan and Lauren came to me in the living room. He looked nervous and she looked honest. "We are thinking," he said, "we would like to stay here for a while, if that is all right, under your rules. If you want us out also, and we will go. I do not want you to feel pushed." I looked at the ring of keys. I reached up and took them down and held the circle in my palm. The metal felt solid and cool. I did not hand them over. I put them back. "We will try it," I said. "If it goes wrong, we will say so and fix it." Lauren nodded. "Thank you," she said. She put her hand on the back of the couch and then took it away as if she had to remind herself, you do not take hold of a thing just because it is there. On a Thursday morning, I was at the market choosing beef for pot roast when I saw Brooke at the dairy case. She wore a plain jacket and had her hair pulled back in a way that did not ask for admiration. Her basket held milk, eggs, a loaf of bread, 2 cans of soup. We saw each other in the reflection of the glass first. She turned. "Helen," she said. I stood with the beef wrapped in paper in my hand and lowered it into the cart. "Brooke," I said. "How are you?" she asked. Her voice was soft. She did not step closer. "I am well," I said. She nodded as if that was a test she had studied for. "I ran into Ethan last week. He said you are cooking again." "He said the hydrangeas are coming back." "They are," I said. She looked down at the floor and then up at me. "I started seeing someone," she said, and then shook her head. "A therapist. I am trying to figure out why I did what I did. I did not come to ask you for anything. I just wanted you to know I am trying." The fluorescent lights buzzed in the quiet between us. A child somewhere on the next aisle laughed like a bell. The cold rolled out from the case and found my ankles. "I do not wish you harm," I said. Her mouth trembled. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I shook my head. "No." "Do you forgive me?" she said. "I live in my house," I said. "That is enough answer." She nodded. She held the strap of her basket with both hands and then let one go. "You look good," she said. "You too," I said. We moved our carts past each other and went on with our lists. At the register, I felt nothing I could name. The feeling was the way the air feels when the pressure changes. Not good. Not bad. A shift. Back at the house, I put the beef in the pot with onions and carrots and let it brown. The tin was open to the Thursday card. The handwriting climbed and dipped. "Season, then wait." I turned the heat down and stood in the steam. The smell rose and filled the kitchen and then moved into the hall and up the stairs. When Ethan came home, he sniffed the air and smiled with his eyes. Lauren tied on an apron and put out plates without asking where they went. We ate at the table with the windows open to the sound of evening. The hydrangeas in the yard had begun to show color at the edges of their blooms, a slow blue seeping into green. After dinner, I stepped onto the porch with a dish towel over my shoulder. The boards under my feet had the familiar give of old wood. The air smelled like wet earth and whatever it is that flowers decide to release when the light tilts. I stood at the rail. The porch light clicked on behind me. In the house, voices moved in and out of each other in a way that did not pull at the wrong places. Somewhere a drawer closed with a soft sound. The keys on the hook touched and were still. I went back inside. The pot on the stove clicked as it cooled. The tin sat open, the top card, a neat rectangle on the counter. I slid it back into place and pressed the lid down until it caught. The sound was small and pleasant. I turned the lock on the back door. The bolt slid home. The house made the low, contented noise of a thing at rad. The hydrangeas breathed against the porch rail, and the smell of rosemary lingered in the warm air of the kitchen. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.